Hello there, I'm your moderator, Sage Goodwin, and as always, I'm joined by the part-time purveyor of astrophysics, Samit Halvadia. How are you doing, man?
That's a new one.
Yeah.
I am doing well, Sage. I do enjoy astrophysics, but I don't know how that made its way into today's
Well,
conversation.
like last episode with Ruben, we had a discussion all about Neil deGrasse Tyson, so I had to
Oh,
bring that in.
that's right. That is correct. About the adoption, the fact that people do not understand exponential probabilities and statistics, and they can't see that far into the future. But hey, that is humanity for you, right?
The snowball known as Windows applications.
Leave it to Coop to bring it right back to Windows applications.
Oh, yes. And that is indeed Jim Cooper, also known as Coop, who is the Chief Technologist, Workforce Services and Solutions at HP, and has a wealth of experience in the tech space, as you can tell, bringing astrophysics back to Windows applications. But today we're going to have a really good discussion on the application space, Windows, the future of application deployment, and just all kinds of fun rabbit holes that we'll get into today. But for people that may not be familiar with you, Coop, what do you do? Who are you?
Yeah, so a quick introduction. Jim Cooper. Been around HP since dirt was invented in '86. Have had several different careers, ranging from back in the old days of data center, big HP Unix machines, HPUX machines. Spent about 4 years in IT, thinking that workforce was an easier task than data center. And boy, it's been a journey ever since. What I thought was going to be a couple of years, go fix the workplace at HP, has been a 20 plus year, really exciting and really fun journey, not only at HP, but also helping customers. Have served as a couple of different roles. Started off in our managed services business after IT. HP bought some little company called EDS, and I joined the Chief Technology Office, became Chief Technologist for Mobility and Workplace for Hewlett-Packard Enterprise Services, and then I rejoined HP Inc. About 5 or 6 years ago, serving as the Chief Technologist for our services business. And recently that became Workforce Services and Solutions, as we've created a standalone business for all of our services. So PC and print, all the services are now underneath the one umbrella, with Dave Scholl, the former CEO of Poly, is leading that business unit.
Yeah, Sage, an interesting thing about Coop, by the way, like as he walks through his background in a very accelerated pace, is is that Coop and I have known each other for a long time, and we've reconnected, obviously with Rimo3 and HP. But one of the unique things that always draws me to the conversations that we end up having around the future of technology adoption and end user is that, if you heard, Coop kind of has touched all of the different parts of the end user compute and desktop management. So he started on the data center side, which everyone knows from an infrastructure perspective is key in order to allow people to work flexibly, securely. He has that hardware background, the Windows applications. If you heard, he was running mobility as a chief technologist. So when AirWatch and Zen Mobile and all those technologies, Mobile Iron, all came out. So the fact is, like, when we start looking at this, that gray hair comes with a lot of wisdom when we start talking about kind of putting all the pieces together. Because me, who's always kind of focused on the end user compute, endpoint management, and application side, I have a very specific view. So a lot of the conversations that we have kind of about the future of work, the kind of what the next evolution of desktop delivery looks like, he's got that hardware spin on it. He's got the spin around the actual security components. So it ends up becoming just kind of a much more complete conversation. So when we were deciding like that Coop is going to come on, I was very excited about the fact that we're going to be talking about, DAS and hardware together. That's just not something that's ever spoken about. I mean, Windows application, sure, but like the concept of how hardware is going to evolve and how software protocols are going to make the native experience of DAS has better. So when we start thinking about the context of today's conversation, it's going to be much more than just kind of the applications just themselves. It's really going to be around the fact of how all these moving parts, including mobility and security, fit into this. So that's just, I didn't give Coop a heads up on that, but that's where I'm planning on diving down today.
I am humbled by, I should get you to write my CV the next time I have to write a CV. But yeah, I think that, most organizations have to combine all vectors to have a great experience for employees. If you focus on one area, another area is going to suffer. And that's what been one of my passions for essentially the past 20 years. Whenever I left working on the data center space to start working in the workplace space. And so, I remember meeting you a long time ago. I'm pretty sure that neither one of us had any of this color facial hair. Definitely, and look forward to the conversation today.
Sage, one of the things that I was talking to you about kind of before we actually jumped on this is, Coop, you just talked about the intersection of different groups and different things to complete a user experience. So many organizations today, even one that I'm talking to, a very large retailer, right, is going through an application modernization. And I don't mean rewriting their homegrown applications. I'm talking about the fact that they are taking their portfolio of applications and trying to move them to a modern Windows application container, right? That they haven't decided what it's going to be, MSIX, app balls, whatever it might be, right? But one of the things that, like, in talking to these guys, they're like, oh no, we're the infrastructure guys. You need to talk to the virtual desktop guys. So you talk to the virtual desktop guys, like, no. You need to talk to the application delivery guys, right? So, it's a very real problem where, as if the shift in digital transformation is not, as if it's not hard enough, segmented teams that have their own independent goals and objectives and KPIs that they're trying to achieve are often not in line. They might even go so far as to be at odds with each other. So as you start thinking about like a holistic digital transformation, very rarely do you see anything where you're crossing multiple segments, multiple teams. Now, some of that's changing, but Coop, what are your thoughts on having been in all of those different parts of it?
Yeah.
Like, what are your thoughts on the limiting factors? Is it the cross-team collaboration? Is it the tooling? What is it? What can we do to help?
It's sort of almost all the above, right? So just, looking historically across the evolution of Windows, we've known for years and years and years the evil part on managing Windows is applications, because as soon as we start installing applications, systems start slowing down. We have registry expansion, registry clutter, potential DLL conflicts. All those create support opportunities and performance enhancement strategies, usually meaning that most employees or a significant number of employees beg to have their machines rebuilt every 12 to 18 months, which basically impacts user productivity, user experience, everything, all the above. And so I know that you and I have for years, for a very long time, said, hey, if we could get rid of applications, managing Windows would be simple. If you get rid of applications, unfortunately, employee productivity tanks, because not all of our productivity applications, not all the in-house developed applications are available via a SaaS environment.
Right.
Putting applications in a virtual desktop does not address the performance and the applications. Case in point, had a customer 3 or 4 years ago that I was working with that believed putting applications on one of the common virtual application technologies hosted in the data center would solve all the problems and would never have to update. That included updating the operating system. And he was stuck on a Win32 server, which created all sorts of other challenges in moving those applications. So we do have to come up with a different strategy for helping customers deal with, the application clutter, the application wind rot issue, and that has historically been, some type of technique to put applications in a different container or reconstruct the applications, recode the applications into something that is highly portable, can take use of modern updating techniques, byte level, something that you would find more in the mobile space.
Right.
Certainly updating mobile applications are not rocket science, and usually updating mobile applications doesn't potentially reduce the performance of your device, whereas on Windows we've historically have seen that. It's no big surprise. I think everybody in the industry is aware of this, including Microsoft. Microsoft has explored various vectors on how to address the problem. Certainly you can recode the applications if you still have the source code, but even having the source code does not mean that the new modern application development techniques can be applied. You can think about a lot of the security products out there that touch the kernel and probably will never be able to become an isolated application. And so we do have opportunities to improve experiences. We have opportunities to create more portable experiences in today's Windows environment, and then over the course of the next 5 to 10 years, potentially explore newer experiences that might be more cloud-like or edge-like, depending on your philosophy.
Kind of like what Samit was saying earlier. Where do you see that combination of physical and the DaaS side of things? Where does that see, or especially like bringing up mentioning of like mobile applications? Do you see us getting to that side of things? I
think, Sage, it's a great question, and we do see more and more applications being developed and coded around, like PWA. Hey, highly portable. You can move those across different experiences. You see the browsers having their unique interpretation of PWA. You see platforms like Teams that's becoming more of an application development platform to improve portability. I think that the question that you brought up initially, though, is where do applications live in the future? My belief, my vision, if I was able, had my crystal ball out, I should have brought one. It's broken because I always buy stock high, sell low. If I get the crystal ball to actually work, but I think one of the notions that we have to explore in the future is applications should live anywhere and everywhere. Two stories with some university students. I usually have the opportunity to lecture over at Indiana University because I live in Bloomington, and I also do capstone projects with students. And so one of the things that I have asked students in the past is, being in a college town, we have an abundance of the crazy little electric scooters. And it's really easy to walk up to a scooter, scan a QR code, and go somewhere, including running over the locals.
There's no resentment in that. That doesn't sound bitter at all, Coop.
No.
You haven't been clipped in the back of an ankle, have you?
Never. But it brings up the whole notion of I can walk up to any scooter, scan a QR code, go to my destination, and move on. So one of the challenges I've talked to students about in the past is, wouldn't it be interesting if we would get to the point 5 or 10 years from now, being able to scan a QR code at the beginning of the semester or the beginning of the week, or maybe the beginning of the day, to have what was the necessary and sufficient compute for your activity. That could include applications being hosted elsewhere, so the anywhere type of a notion. And then the other aspect is, I think everybody knows that we can build incredibly small CPUs, and so there is nothing that prevents a furniture company from embedding compute in every device that they make, and put it in floor tiles, etc. The technology is there. The issue we have is how do you access the compute securely, and how do you trust that compute? How do you monetize? And so I think those are really two vectors that if we can think about over the next 5 to 10 years on how do we create simplification, how's compute everywhere, and how do we take advantage of applications that might become very diversified in their capabilities and the resources that they need to be successful. So that's Coop's big vision for the future, bringing that back to what customers need to do now.
Yeah.
Because the future is subject to change. Windows 10, Windows 11 are by definition going to happen. 10's already there. Windows 11, we're in the.
We thought 10 was the end all be all, and now we have 11.
Yeah, that's what I heard. The last version of Windows was Windows 10, and now we're hearing rumors of Windows 12. So we know that applications have to evolve and stay up to date. So how do we take advantage? And I think that's the work that Samit, you and I have. Hey, get our big brains down to how do we help customers today? And I think that is. How do we help customers accept change, embrace change? How do we help customers accelerate their transformation? And I think that's where technology that Rimo3 brings to the table actually helps customers, right? Analyze applications, can analyze applications every day, which is really sweet. Being able to do that, identify applications. Sage, you brought up, cloud or physical. It should be both, but we also know, I think the three of us and probably every one of your guest stars all know that applications don't always work in the virtual world just because they work in the physical world. And so we need to be able to help customers make good and wise choices. I've got a couple of customers right this second. Hey, we're just going to put everything in a virtual desktop.
Oh, right.
Is that an absolute? Well, yes. If it runs on a physical PC, it's going to run in a cloud PC. And it's like, well,
love your enthusiasm.
No.
But
yeah, exactly. So how do we help customers deal with acceleration and transformation, acceleration of change, help them accelerate? How do we de-risk change? I think that we do that through regular testing, a new security control, a new release of the operating system, a update to another application. All those can actually break applications. And historically, we all know that customers have sort of skirted the four-letter word called test. We know that they don't. It's been incredibly difficult to test all applications all the time because that was a very labor-intensive cost. And now with Rimo3, we can actually, again, we can test every single day. We can test every other hour, set of applications. It's all done automatically. We can flag the applications that will work in the virtual world. You can help customers weave through all the applications that don't and go, I would never run these applications in the virtual world anyway. Whenever I said everything's moving to the cloud, I didn't really mean everything. I meant most everything, but not literally everything. And so we can help have those conversations with customers. And then I think very quickly, and this is where our HP Pro Services is evolving, is how do we help customers with picking the right isolation technology? I'm all in, but I also know today, and we're recording this almost in December of 2022, there is not an absolute Windows isolation technology. They all have pros, they all have cons. Some's better than the other for certain circumstances. So I believe, and I think Samit, you and I have talked long and hard about this. Is there a 100% guaranteed way to fully automate and produce a isolated application? And I think that we both tell customers now, hey, this is a conversation. You need to understand the pros and the cons of different approaches. And hey, not everything is going to be isolated. but when you can, you should, because the benefits are outstanding. And being able to leverage some of the automation that Rimo3 has brought on just validating, hey, this application is going to perform better in isolation, and surely to goodness would never perform worse. But hey, advising the customer, what is the impact of isolation on resources and performance and user experience is something that just really helps customers de-risk change. And so one of my big themes is, how do we de-risk change? How do we help customers through this whole inevitable acceleration of change? We can look every month and what has changed is accelerating compared to what it was 20 years ago. Hey, operating systems didn't change but every 7 years, and now they change every month. And so how do we provide that de-risking?
Yeah, I think, Coop, to your point, I also get this question a lot, which is, why is this not well, I get two questions. Why is this not a problem in my Mac world or in my Linux world, right? That's one, and it's a legit question, right? I've got a Linux container, Kubernetes, it's portable, it's beautiful, it's sexy, I can move it around. The reality is that, I come back to the same, people will not accuse Windows of being innovative anymore, but it was a hugely innovative operating system. And it was one of the first to actually be adopted by businesses, at 25 years ago, 30 years ago. So you've accrued 30 years worth of this technology debt of people creating VB apps and Pascal apps and all these other types of apps that are still fundamentally critical to the operations of their business. And it's not something, to your point, Coop, you can't just find the source code of that. The developer's been gone for 20 years, or, there's so much legacy debt, and there's no uniformity across all of the different types of Windows applications because of the flexibility that Win32 used to provide. And, Win60, you're now in a position where you have a plethora of applications that are being held together with bubblegum and Band-Aids, and they're the ones that we're looking to modernize and migrate, right? You cannot just containerize something that's 25 years old and expect it to be fixed. So when Coop and I talk about containerization, it's two different things, right? For me, Windows containerization, would I love to create the universal Windows file format, or UWFF? That's mine, by the way.
Patent pending.
That is mine. I would love to be able to create that type of file format, but there's just too much diversity across tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of applications that are sitting out there that are specifically being managed by enterprises inside of their Windows endpoint management environments, right? That becomes in itself a mitigating factor to the transformation that you're looking to do. I mean, to Coop's example, it got me thinking, you've got those Lime scooters or whatever brand of scooter there are. And, you snap a QR code and it's tied to your PayPal and off you go, right? You're not even wearing a helmet. You're not, you haven't been certified and instructed. You're not insured. None of this stuff is happening. It's just built from the ground up. When you build something natively from the ground up, you don't have to worry about the last 30 years of baloney that's been sitting out there accruing, right? It's like trying to think of, you remember Zipcar when that tried to come out, Coop?
Yeah.
Right. So they try to do the same thing with cars that they did. And they're like, we're done with the Hertz model. You don't have to go to the counter and show them your registration, your driver's license. They have to look at your form. They're going to do a walk around a vehicle. By the time you're done, you've taken a long flight, you've gotten to the Hertz rental car, and you're like, 2 hours later, you're finally in your car trying to figure out in this paper map where you're going to go. Then they've evolved that process, but they couldn't quite get it to a QR code and off I go, right? I walk up to a car, I snap a QR code, and then I leave, right? I still have to go in, pick my car, show my license, get it checked out, when you're going through the gate at the airport. So it's gotten better, but it's not as easy as a Lime scooter. And the same thing goes for Windows apps. You cannot just take a process that's been around for 30 years and say, I'm going to apply the Lime scooter model to a rental car model. That, the best you can do is still like Hertz and rental cars. They've made it easier. I can walk up to my car because I'm President Circle or whatever. I get in, the car's already in there. You push the button, you go and you drive to that gate, and then they do all that stuff. So it's 15 minutes instead of 2 hours. Marginal improvements is what we're going to expect over the next 5 to 10 to 20 years around Windows applications. If we can eventually get to the point of everything moving towards SaaS or everything moving towards a containerized application, then we have that ultimate portability. But our goal in the meantime, if we look at it from a real customer perspective, is what can I do to eliminate the risk associated with your technical debt while still giving your users a relatively modern and pain-free experience without a huge amount of human interaction. That's the way that I look at success for the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, I agree. And, there are literally millions of in-house developed applications. Windows applications are not going to go away.
Right.
I think some of the really interesting things on the horizon would be, the next generation of in-house developed applications around, the various, UiPath, Power Automate. But those two, if we're not really careful, we could be having a conversation somebody could have a conversation 20 years from now. I'm expecting to, either be in front of the, Coop in front of the Cooper Smith or at the beach in 20 years. But we've got to be really careful on citizen developers. And what do citizens developers create from? Yes, most of the mobile, even the modern Windows applications all start from the premise of don't impact the rest of the operating system, don't impact your neighbor.
Right.
Whereas Windows itself, let's be honest, we're taking predominantly a lot of things that came from the data center about, process to process communications, et cetera. And we've put it into a really, really small package, whereas most other endpoint devices tend to execute one application, might be 1,000 services behind it, but one user experience at a time. And as we start evolving our way of creating isolated applications and sort of diversifying them into smaller chunks, I think that applications will evolve. We just need to be careful on how to help customers set great ground rules on how to develop those types of applications.
You're 100% right. Like when you start thinking about this, like Sage, so the concept of citizen developers and enterprise low code and no code is one that's been around for a while, right? And it's one that is gaining market traction in general, as you Gen Zers are much more clever than us typical end users are, that can come in and build something fit for purpose to help them be more productive in their roles. And having the tooling to be able to go back and do that is a great thing. But along with that comes the complexity of, is it secure? And you start ending up with code snippet crawl, right? And when you start having Sage has built his own module, and then Carson's built her own module, and Samit's built his, and Coop has built an entirely different application to achieve the same outcome. Now you've started going down a path that is completely untenable when it comes to managing the true nature of your enterprise estate. So like, if you start thinking about, I was fortunate enough to speak to the CIO of a very large consulting firm. And in 2012, he made the decision that he is going to rewrite every single one of his Windows applications. Every single one of their Windows applications, from ticketing to service, to billing, to anything around SOW creation, to escalations, to change management.
Good grief.
And this is a large consultancy that has a variety of different practices. So 10 years later, they're coming upon the completion of it, tens of millions of dollars later, and they've rewritten everything in SaaS. Not everyone has that luxury.
Yeah.
Right. But now he's running into the same problem we just talked about. He's like, we've made it so flexible that now with all of our SaaS offerings, these enterprise low code, no code tooling that's out there, our citizen developers are building their own little applets and their own little modules to our SaaS offering that we don't know what they're doing. We don't know if they're stealing data. We don't know if they're doing any of these types of things. So with great power comes great responsibility, right, Spider-Man? But the reality is there's no way to control it at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. And, I've had lots of conversations about the whole low code, no code. You have issues with security, issues with trust, and issues with, Fred created something that computes, I don't know, end of quarter percentages. Sally is using those percentages to compute something else because you can daisy chain various low code, no codes together. And how do you teach good configuration management? How do you teach security? How do you teach trustability? Because you really need to trust the answers and what the downstream effect is on the word trust. Having said all this for the past, I think 5 or so minutes, tomorrow is actually not that much less of an issue than what we experience today.
Right. Sprawl is still sprawl. Yeah.
And so we have to fundamentally change how organizations interact with applications and user productivity. It would be great to wave the magic wand and say, all applications are SaaSified. That doesn't really address the trustability of the application. It doesn't really address the long-term nature. It just says, I'm moving a significant part of the problem to somewhere else.
Yes.
And we need to, as an industry, really, really address some of the fundamentals. What does making a change cause? What does making a change do to my user experience? Are the outcomes trustworthy? And I think that this is where I will put words in Samit's mouth, that I've been on a bully pulpit with the whole digital twin for the better part of several years of saying, hey, we need to simulate this. We need to run through simulations. We need to be able to validate outcomes. That is more important right this second than rewriting applications.
100%.
Over the course of time, if this application always requires, bubblegum, duct tape, baling wire every single time that there's a change, we need to probably figure out how to change the application.
Right.
But we have got to do a better job in simulation, the whole configuration management. Great, we've got configuration management. That's probably about a 30 or 40-year-old construct. But we're at the point in time where we need to have a digital twin that simulates the configuration management to validate what is the next box on the whole board game that's acceptable for the customer's business outcome. And that is taking a long time to actually get people to understand the fundamental business impact that change has on business outcomes.
Yeah, to me, like you bring up this configuration management. The same thing happens with Sally and Fred, right? It's like I'm going to stick on the Spider-Man theme. It's like that Spider-Man meme with the 3 Spider-Mans pointing at each other like this. Like, why is your data wrong, Sally? Well, because Fred's algorithm is wrong. Fred's like, no, my algorithm's right. The data source is all polluted. Someone needs to clean that, right? So like, as you get into these, and the same thing happens with configuration management, right? Oh no, my app works just fine. You've changed the variables and security of your OS to make it sys level 1 hardened, and that's what's causing my application to fail. That's not my fault. That's your fault. And the only way to kind of proactively and preemptively answer these questions is where Coop and I talk about this concept of de-risking through the digital twin. If you don't have a like for like, the only way to know if something's going to work or not, whether you use automation or you use a human to do it, irrelevant. I need the same exact environment I'm going to deploy to. I need the same exact application that I'm going to deploy to, and I need to run it. And I need to see if it's going to break. If it doesn't break, then I know for a fact that when I deploy it to the same exact environment in production, it's not going to break. That's the only way to know. No static analysis. There's no rules engine. There's no algorithm. It's straight up execution, right? Like for like. If it's not like for like, if it's vanilla, it's it's irrelevant, right? It has to, the relevancy is based on the fact that you are testing your version against your digital twin. Without your digital twin, you might as well not test it at all.
Exactly. And it has to be relevant. It has to mirror, it has to be a twin of your environment. It can't be a hypothetical experience. It's got to resemble. I know that we've talked to a couple of CISOs about the impact of changing security controls on Windows devices. Not that every few months there's not a new set of security controls, any of which could have an impact, but also security applications that multi-layer security and what that may or may not do to applications. And so fundamentally, digital twins also help identify impact to applications that might be a result of a new security control that an organization wants to implement. And it's always better to do that in the lab, in a simulation, rather than rolling it out to 100,000 people and find out that something doesn't work. And so I think the next year, this whole notion of digital twins will in fact gain a lot of traction. That's my prediction. And hopefully it goes right along with the adoption of change, acceleration of change, transformation with the whole Windows 10 to Windows 11 by October 2025. We know that there's a few devices out there that need to be updated, as well as applications. That's my crystal ball for the near term, my crystal ball for the long term.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to disagree. And the weird thing about all of this, Coop, as we're talking through it in front of an audience, as opposed to just you and I over a beer or a whiskey, going down the rabbit hole, it's really more about the fact that, when you kind of lay it out like this, what you start seeing is that there are, that rate of change that you talked about, an OS every 7 months. Forget about the OS every 1 month with a cumulative update. It's these security controls, it's NIST, it's all of these other things. What is it? I can't remember the number. Maybe I think it's Azure Virtual Desktop. The underlying infrastructure of that, it has like 1,200 changes every single year. There's so much change because we're learning so quickly and we're adapting so quickly that we need to be without a digital twin. Like I don't, and automation, I don't see a way of keeping up with the pace of change without at least swallowing some risk. And I feel like people right now, because they don't know that there's better processes, there's better tooling, and there's just another way to do things. I kind of alluded to this in my last podcast with Ruben, where just because you've ridden a buggy, a horse and carriage, right, with a whip, doesn't mean you're going to drive your Tesla with a whip. You have to change your processes. You have to change your tooling. And right now, I think there's just a lack of knowledge and education around, what people can do with limited manual resources, which should be focused on innovation and revenue generation and de-risk, like automate all the boring stuff. And I think that change management is pretty boring.
Yeah. And it ought to be change management, digital twin ought to just be a service. It ought to be an automated service. The challenges is making the industry or encouraging the industry to explore new venues. And the way you do that.
So why do you think it's a challenge to tell the industry that as a service, this should be something that's completely automated? Do you think it's because service providers make a living based on hours billed or statements of work? Or do you think it's just because they've got so much pipeline and work that they're not willing to innovate on something new?
I look at even HP internally with how we're working with Rimo3 is change. It has nothing really to do beyond, hey, how do we change business models? How do we change go to market? How do we change? So even in working through a new service, we have to embrace change. Technology changes. Industry, I think, HP's visions, much like yours, is that we want to offer customers the ability to embrace the acceleration of change, accelerate their transformation at a lower risk point. That will enable customers to ask service providers, whether it's a cloud service provider or other technology provider, to innovate faster. If we can innovate faster, then the industry changes. And so one of the things that we've talked about previously is, hey, we both know and have friends at Microsoft and the Azure Virtual Desktop, Windows 365. But the worst thing we can do is say, the only cloud virtualization technology is Azure, because we all know if you if you sit back and relax, you don't innovate. And so we really think that it ought to be a multi-cloud experience. I know you and I have talked about it really needs to be a multi-cloud experience. That has nothing to do with who owns what technology, who I'm friends with. It's how do we move the industry along at an accelerated pace to help drive innovation. And I think that our mutual friends at Microsoft would agree with that statement. And we just have to think, where can we be 5 years from now? Where can we be 10 years from now if the industry continues to innovate and help customers embrace that whole transformation, embrace the acceleration of change? Change should not be something that you're scared of.
Yeah.
I ask my wife, I ask my family, I ask anybody and everybody, and I would ask you and Sage, how many times are you scared to update your mobile application?
Never.
Yeah, never.
So why as an industry are so many organizations still fearful on updating a driver, updating firmware, updating an operating system, updating applications and Windows? We have got to help every customer that's listening out there, ring up HP and ring up Rimo3. We want to help customers embrace change. We want to help customers accelerate transformation. I think that you can probably tell I might be a little bit passionate about that, but that really helps people like Samit and I who have other ideas on this whole notion of what's the innovative change for tomorrow? How do we get people to go to the next 3 steps if we cannot get people to deal with the immediate changes that they have to deal with, let alone excite them to make additional changes to help their users be even more productive, be even more creative in the future? We've got to deal with this whole resistance to change.
I could not agree more with that. I mean, like you talked about the innovative change, right? Like, oh yeah, I want to move to, a co-managed environment where a little bit is DaaS, a little bit is hybrid, a little bit is virtual, a little bit is physical. People just don't, I'm like, okay, let me get into your config manager and pull all of you. They're like, no. I don't want to mess with anything in config manager. It's too scary, right? Like just getting and that's basically just table stakes, because that's where all your apps reside. That's where all your old Gold OS images reside. That's where all of your, policies reside, dependencies, everything around your endpoint management resides there. And they're afraid to move away from that, even though that technology is almost as old as me. Not quite, but it's definitely way older than Sage.
Oh yes.
So innovation, like it comes with two. The first is just a level of comfort to adopt something new. The second is just to get started. I have a hard time getting customers to even say, okay, I don't want to know what's in my SCCM. I'm a little worried if you do an inventory. It's going to be horrifying and I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Right. It's like smashing a spider and then looking underneath your boot or something. Like I don't want to see what's under there because it's going to be horrible.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So I think that, this is the part that really inspires me to go have conversation with customers is how do we help make those changes? How can we help get to tomorrow? Listen, the future of innovation is incredible. But I can't really get you to the incredible part if you don't do what is necessary and sufficient to empower your employees literally tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a perfect place to kind of tie this conversation to an end. Thanks again, Coop, for joining us and taking some time out of your day to talk nerdy with us.
Yeah. Hey, always invite me back again.
Oh, yes.
Oh, definitely.
Rimo3 fully automates pre-production compatibility testing, package modernization, and migration of your Windows application estate. From migration to maintenance, Rimo3's intelligent unattended automation eliminates the need for scripting, specific expertise, or complex configuration. Your apps, your workspace, our priority.